The call came close to midnight. A young man said he worked at a motel out on Route 19. He asked, "Mr. Carter, your wife's here. Her car won't start." I almost told him he had the wrong number because Elaine was supposed to be 2 hours east at her friend's house in Harrisburg. But he repeated the name, Blue Pine Motel, 40 miles west. Something in me went cold. I drove through the storm, the wipers keeping time with my heartbeat. When I pulled into the parking lot, her car was there, covered in snow. Light leaked from room 12. I saw her shadow, and another beside it. She stepped out, froze when she saw me, said softly, "Jack, it's not what you think." Thing is, when someone says that, you already know exactly what it is. But that night didn't end at the motel. That night was just where the story began. The snow kept falling. I drove in silence, the wipers beating a slow rhythm. Elaine sat beside me, hands folded tight in her lap. She tried to speak once, then stopped. Her perfume filled the truck. Something new, too sweet. I stared at the road, the white lines disappearing under the snow. Every mile felt longer than the last. She said, "Jack, please, let's talk when we get home." I nodded, but words wouldn't come. After 43 years, I couldn't tell if the sound in my chest was rage or grief. At the red light near the diner, she reached for my hand. I moved it to the gear shift instead. Neither of us said another word. When we reached the house, she walked straight inside. I stayed behind the wheel a long time. Engine running, snow melting on the windshield. That was the first moment I realized silence can hurt louder than shouting. The house was warm, but it felt empty. Elaine turned on every light, like brightness could erase what happened. She set the kettle on the stove, hands shaking. "Let's just forget tonight," she whispered. I watched her from the doorway. The woman making tea looked familiar, but not known. Steam fogged the window above the sink. Outside, the snow kept falling. She asked if I wanted coffee. I said no. Her wedding ring clinked against the cup. That sound cut deeper than words. I wanted to ask who the man was. I wanted to demand a name, a reason, but all I managed was, "Go to bed." She hesitated, then nodded. The clock ticked loud in the quiet kitchen. When she finally walked down the hall, I stayed there under that harsh light, staring at the steam and thinking, you can share a house with someone and still feel completely alone. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark listening to the wind scrape against the siding. The bedroom door was closed. I could hear her turning in bed. 43 years of marriage, and I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I thought about the first day we met at the county fair. She laughed when I spilled lemonade on my boots. That sound had built my life. Now I couldn't remember what her laugh even felt like. At 3 a.m., I walked to the workshop. The smell of sawdust steadied me. My hands found a piece of oak, rough and cold. I sanded until the surface turned smooth. Wood always told the truth. If it cracked, you saw it. People hid theirs under smiles. When the first light hit the windows, I still hadn't stopped working. The board was clean, perfect, but nothing I made could fix what was breaking inside me. The sun came pale through the curtains. Elaine stood at the stove making pancakes like it was any other Thursday. She smiled too fast. "I burned the first batch," she said. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around my coffee cup. The smell of syrup turned my stomach. She set a plate in front of me and whispered, "Jack, it was a mistake." That word, mistake, hung in the air like smoke. I cut the pancake, tasted ash. She started to cry, saying she met an old friend. Things got out of hand. I listened without answering. When she reached for my hand, I didn't move. 43 years couldn't be summed up by one word. When she finally said, "We can fix this," I looked at her and nodded. Not because I forgave her, but because I was too tired to fight. For a few days, she acted like nothing had happened. She hummed while she cleaned, cooked my favorite meals. Every time her phone buzzed, she left the room. I told myself she was ashamed, not sneaking around again. Denial is its own kind of comfort. I went back to my workshop, tried to lose myself in wood and tools, but every sound, the saw, the hammer, reminded me of building this house with her. I remembered how proud we'd been when the roof went on. Now, even the walls felt hollow. At night, she'd say, "Good night, Jack," from the doorway. I'd answer, "Good night," without looking up. We were two strangers living in a museum of old promises, and still, a part of me kept hoping she'd walk in one morning and tell the truth. That hope was the cruelest part. Saturday morning, I went through the bills. Routine, just something to keep my hands busy. The folder of bank statements was thinner than it should have been. June, July, August. Gone. I checked again, then again. Elaine was at the store, or that's what she said. My stomach turned cold. I opened the laptop, the one we both used for years. Her email was still signed in. At the top, a message. 2 more weeks, baby. I clicked. The words blurred. Money, cabin, freedom, and a name I didn't know. Colin. My hands started to shake. 18 months of messages, withdrawals, lies. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been planning her escape. I sat there until the screen dimmed, listening to the refrigerator hum. All those nights, she said she was shopping. She'd been building a new life, using mine to pay for it. I printed every message, every statement I could find. The sound of the printer was loud in the quiet room, pages stacked like snowdrifts. Each one felt heavier than the last. I highlighted the dates, the amounts, the lies. $47,000, gone. When she came home, I was still at the table. She asked why I looked so pale. I said I wasn't feeling well. That wasn't a lie. She kissed my forehead, went to start dinner. I stared at the papers, at her handwriting in those emails. He doesn't even notice me. He smells like oil and old wood. That's how she described me. Furniture. Something to lean on. Not love. I folded the pages into a box and locked it in the desk. Truth didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to be kept safe until the right moment. Sunday morning, Hank stopped by. He saw my face and knew something was wrong. We'd been friends since high school. He didn't ask questions, just poured coffee and waited. When I finally told him, he sighed. "Don't do anything stupid," he said. "Be smart. Get proof. Protect yourself." I nodded. He wrote down a lawyer's name on a napkin. Marissa Cole. Said she'd helped his nephew through a bad divorce. After he left, I sat on the porch with the napkin in my hand. The snow had melted into dirty patches of ice. I thought about every time I'd fixed someone's car for free, every extra hour I'd worked so Elaine wouldn't have to worry. $47,000 wasn't just money. It was my life measured in grease and calluses. By sunset, I knew what I had to do. Not revenge, just survival. Monday morning, I called Marissa Cole. Her voice was calm, firm. She told me to come in that afternoon and bring everything. At 2 o'clock, I sat in her office, papers spread across her desk. She read in silence, pen tapping softly. When she finished, she looked me in the eye. "This isn't just infidelity, Mr. Carter. It's fraud." The word hit harder than I expected. Fraud. She explained what to do: open a new account, copy every document, tell no one. Her voice never rose, but it steadied me. When she said, "You trusted someone you loved. That's not weakness," I almost broke. I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out into the cold. The sky was clear for the first time in days. I stood there on the sidewalk, papers in my coat, and for the first time since the motel, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. That night, I spread everything across the kitchen table. Bank statements, emails, receipts, truth laid out under the same light where we once ate dinner. Elaine was asleep. I could hear her breathing down the hall, steady, unbothered. I highlighted every missing dollar, every lie, 47,000 reasons to stop pretending. When I finished, I sat back and looked at the house I'd built with my hands. Every nail, every board, every memory. I realized she'd already left me long before that motel. All I had to do now was make it official. Tomorrow, I'd call the lawyer again. Tomorrow, I'd start protecting what was left. The snow outside had turned to rain. It tapped against the window like quiet applause. Not for winning, just for finally waking up. I woke before dawn. Rain had turned to a thin mist across the windows. Elaine was still asleep, breathing slow and even. I watched her for a moment, trying to recognize the woman beside me. Nothing looked different, yet everything had changed. I slipped from bed, brewed coffee, and sat at the table where the papers still waited. Each page was proof of what I already knew. I wrote down a list. Bank accounts, insurance, mortgage deeds. Then another list, things I couldn't replace. My father's tools, my mother's clock, the wedding photo she'd probably want to keep. When the sun rose, I heard her footsteps. She smiled like yesterday hadn't happened, asked about breakfast. I said I had errands. As I walked to the truck, she called after me, "Don't be gone all day." I didn't answer. Some silences speak louder than promises. That morning, I stopped being a husband trying to forgive. I became a man trying to survive. The teller recognized me from years of small-town visits. She smiled, asked about the garage. I said business was slow. When she asked about Elaine, my throat tightened. I handed her the withdrawal slip for a new account. Half the savings, $23,400. She checked the signature twice, then nodded. While the printer hummed, I watched the security camera above her desk. I wondered if it could see guilt. When she passed the folder back, she said, "Everything okay, Mr. Carter?" I told her it would be. The lie rolled off easy, smoother than I expected. Outside, drizzle clung to my coat. I drove straight to the hardware store for boxes, locks, plastic folders. Preparation feels like control, even when the world's falling apart. Before heading home, I parked behind the diner and sat for a while, listening to the radio static mix with the rain. Each sound felt like a heartbeat I didn't quite trust anymore. Back home, I carried the folders to the workshop. The place smelled of oil and cedar, safe and honest. I began sorting receipts, labeling each envelope. Then, at the bottom of the cabinet, I found something new. A lease agreement. 2 Pines Cabin, signed by Elaine Carter and Colin Reed, paid in full. 18-month term. My breath caught. $22,000 for a cabin I'd never seen. The ink was barely dry. I sat down on the stool, papers trembling in my hands. They had built their own world while living in mine. Every Thursday she'd said book club. Every Thursday she'd been somewhere else, buying a future with my money. Outside, the wind rattled the gutters. Inside, everything felt still. I folded the lease, slid it into an envelope marked evidence. Then I locked the drawer. Proof didn't change pain, but it gave it shape. And shapes can be fought. That afternoon, Hank knocked on the side door. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, same as always. One look at my face and he said, "You found more, didn't you?" I nodded, showed him the lease. He whistled low, shook his head. "You need to stay quiet. Let the lawyer handle it." I told him about the new account, about moving half the funds. He approved, said, "Good, protect what's yours." We sat in silence a while, watching the rain ease into sunlight. Hank told me about his own scare years ago, his wife's online messages. He forgave her, but it never felt the same. "Don't make my mistake," he said. "Once trust cracks, you can't glue it back." When he left, I felt lighter and heavier at once. I locked the workshop door behind him. It wasn't fear anymore. It was preparation. I wasn't the victim now. I was getting ready for the truth. The next morning, Marissa called. Her voice was steady, clipped. She'd run a background check on Colin Reed, married, 2 kids, business failing. She said, "I think he targeted her for money." I didn't speak. The truth came clean, sharp, impossible to swallow. She went on, explaining legal steps, asset freezes, documentation. I only heard fragments. Fraud, theft, restitution. When she finished, she asked, "Do you want me to contact his wife?" I said not yet. She agreed, but told me to keep everything copied twice. Before hanging up, she added, "You're handling this better than most." I thanked her, but the words tasted wrong. Better? Nothing about this felt better. After the call, I sat on the porch. The world looked washed out, winter light too pale to feel warm. I thought about Colin's wife, another woman living in a lie. Maybe she'd get the same call someday. That evening, headlights swept across the driveway. Elaine's car, and behind it, a lifted truck. He stepped out first. Broad shoulders, smug smile. Colin Reed in flesh and arrogance. He started up the walk, but Hank was already outside, blocking the path. "Private property," he said. Colin smirked. "Easy, old man." Elaine's voice came shaky. "Please don't." I stood on the porch, calm but cold. "Leave, yeah," I told him. He laughed. "You gonna stop me?" I didn't move, just said, "Sheriff's a minute away if I call." His grin faltered. Hank's phone was in his hand. Elaine grabbed Colin's arm, pulled him toward the truck. He spat on the gravel and peeled off. When the noise faded, I looked at her. She tried to speak. I turned away. Some conversations are better left to silence. That night, she slept in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. Thursday morning, the phone rang. Amy. Her voice sounded small, cautious. "Dad, what's going on?" Elaine had called her first, told her I'd lost control, changed the locks, emptied accounts. I tried to explain, but she talked over me. "Mom says you're seeing things. Please get help." I listened, jaw tight. Then I said, "Sweetheart, I'm not crazy. I just finally see clearly." Silence. Then she whispered, "I don't know who to believe." That hurt worse than the motel. When she hung up, I sat staring at the wall. Elaine walked in, pretending not to notice the call. She poured herself coffee, humming. The sound felt cruel. I stepped outside, needed air. Snow had melted into brown grass. I thought about Amy as a little girl, believing every word I said. Now she believed her mother. Lies travel faster than truth. By afternoon, whispers had spread. At the diner, people stopped mid-conversation when I walked in. Betty, the waitress, offered extra coffee with soft eyes. Two men at the counter avoided looking my way. In small towns, news doesn't travel. It grows. I finished my meal in silence. Paid cash, left a large tip. Outside, a text came from a neighbor. "We're praying for you." Another followed. "You should be ashamed, Jack." Two sides already forming, truth divided by gossip. I drove home slow, headlights off until the last turn. The house glowed in the dark, warm and false. Inside, Elaine sat by the fire, pretending to read. I passed her without a word. The living room smelled like cinnamon and distance. It hit me then. She wasn't scared. She thought she'd win the story. But I still had the evidence. And time. That night, she waited until Hank left, then cornered me in the kitchen. "You're ruining everything," she said. "People think you're losing your mind." I stared at the floor, the same spot where she once danced barefoot. She reached for my arm. "Jack, stop this before it's too late." I looked at her hand, pale and shaking. "Too late was months ago," I said. Her eyes hardened. "You'll end up alone." "Maybe," I answered. "Better alone than lied to." She left, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the empty rooms. I stood there, heart steady for the first time. Tomorrow, Marissa would file the papers. Tomorrow, the pretending would end. I turned off the lights, one by one. Each click sounded like closure. By the time I reached the bedroom, the house was dark, and for once, the silence didn't feel like loss. Friday dawned bright and brittle. Frost traced the windows, thin as breath. I made coffee, packed her clothes carefully into suitcases. No anger, just order. At noon, the locksmith arrived. By 2, the new locks were in place. Marissa called. "Papers filed, restraining order pending." "Be calm, Mr. Carter. Let the law work." I promised I would. At 5, Hank came with his camera to document everything. We moved through each room, quiet and steady. When we finished, I lined her suitcases by the door, taped an envelope on top. Proof, statements, truth. Outside, the air smelled like snow again. I sat on the porch, hands around a cooling mug. Hank asked, "You ready for this?" I said, "Yeah, ready." Headlights turned into the driveway. Elaine's car. She saw the suitcases. Froze. For a second, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I stood waiting. It was time for the end to begin. Elaine stepped from the car slowly. Wind caught her hair, scattered it across her face. She saw the suitcases lined up, the envelope taped on top. Her voice broke. "Jack, what is this?" I said, "Truth." She opened the envelope, hands trembling. Pages spilled, emails, statements, the cabin lease. Her face turned white. "You went through my private things." "Our computer, our money," I said. She tried to sound strong. "You can't throw me out. It's my house, too." "Not anymore." She looked toward the street, as if someone might help. No one did. She whispered, "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem now." Tears slid down her cheek. She called Colin, voice shaking. I waited. 10 minutes later, I heard a truck engine. Gravel sprayed across the yard. The man stepped out. Colin Reed, real and small under daylight. This time, there would be no running. Colin walked toward me, chest puffed, false calm. "You think you scared me with your papers?" I held out another envelope. "Bank records, timestamps, property lease, copies with the sheriff." His grin twitched. Elaine moved between us, pleading, "Please, stop." He snapped, "Stay out of it." I said, "You stole from me." He laughed. "She gave it willingly." "Joint funds, that's theft." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I said, "Your wife knows." His head jerked. "What?" "Marissa told her. Sharon filed charges this morning." He froze. Elaine stared at him. "You're married?" He didn't answer. Color drained from her face. She whispered, "You lied to me." He turned on her. "Don't make this about me." I stepped forward once. "Get off my property." He looked around, neighbors watching from porches. The fight left him. He muttered something low, got back in the truck, and left her standing in the driveway with everything undone. Elaine stayed there long after his truck was gone. The wind tugged at her coat. Finally, she looked at me. "Please, Jack, I can explain." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to explain." Her voice cracked. "We can fix this." "No." We can't. I opened the door and stepped aside. Take your things. Go. She hesitated, then bent to grab a suitcase. Halfway to the car, she stopped. You'll regret this, she said. I already do. She drove away fast, taillights fading down the road. The sound disappeared into the cold air. I stood there until the silence felt heavier than the snow. Inside, the house looked different. Same furniture, but empty now. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the last flakes fall across the yard. 43 years gone. Just gone. I whispered her name once, and the room didn't answer. Lights flicked on across the street. Doors cracked open. People always watch endings. Doris called, "You all right, Jack?" I nodded. Ed asked if I needed help. No, thank you. They drifted back inside, leaving me with the quiet. Hank stayed standing beside the porch rail. He said softly, "You did what you had to." I wanted to believe him. We sat without speaking. The smell of coffee and cold wood mixed in the air. After a while, he said, "She'll come back, you know." "Not here." He nodded. "She'll try to talk to Amy. Be ready." I hadn't thought of that yet. When he left, I locked every door. Inside the still house, I could hear the clock ticking, each second louder than the last. Freedom didn't sound like peace. It sounded like loss finding its voice. Morning came gray and hollow. I walked through each room, touching the walls I'd built. The kitchen smelled like dust instead of breakfast. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter. I rinsed it clean, set it upside down to dry. Simple things felt impossible. I went to the workshop, turned on the radio. Same station, same songs, but they felt older. I sanded a chair leg until it shone. The rhythm steadied me. Hank stopped by with more coffee. He said the sheriff served the restraining order. Elaine couldn't come back. I nodded, kept sanding. He asked, "How's it feel?" "Like breathing after a long hold," I said. He smiled sadly. When he left, I looked around the workshop. Every mark on the wood told a story. Most stories end quietly. Mine had too, just not the way I planned. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Her handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the table, drank coffee, stared at it. Finally, I tore it open. She wrote about fear, about growing old, feeling invisible. She said Colin made her feel young again. She said she was sorry that she still loved parts of me, that maybe someday I'd understand. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Some apologies come too late to matter. I walked it to the workshop stove and burned it, watching the paper curl and turn black. The flame made no sound. When it was gone, I swept the ashes into a tin. That tin joined the others on the shelf. Nails, screws, leftover pieces from a life once whole. I didn't cry. There was nothing left that tears could fix. Sunday afternoon, Hank returned, bringing lunch. We ate on the porch, quiet at first. Then he said, "You talked to Amy yet?" I shook my head. "She won't answer." "She will," he said. "Give it time." He told me stories about his late wife, how they argued, how they laughed anyway. Listening hurt in a good way. Before leaving, he said, "Don't live in that empty house too long." I asked what he meant. "Keep moving, Jack. Stillness turns grief to rot." After he left, I looked at the road stretching beyond the fence line. Cars passed, lives moving forward. I wondered how long it would take before mine did too. That night, I sat on the porch alone, moonlight spilling over the yard. Somewhere out there, Elaine was learning what regret costs. Somewhere closer, I was learning how to keep breathing. 3 days later, headlights flashed outside. Amy's car. I opened the door before she could knock. Her face was pale, eyes swollen. She said, "I found your letters, Dad." I nodded. She stepped inside, holding old envelopes, the ones I wrote to Elaine before we married. She said, "I read every one. You meant every word." Her voice broke. "Mom lied to me." I didn't speak. She hugged me, crying into my shoulder. "I'm sorry I believed her," she whispered. "You're here now," I said. We sat at the table for a long time, talking about everything except betrayal. Sometimes love returns quietly, without fireworks, just the sound of forgiveness finding room to breathe. Amy asked to learn woodworking, said she wanted to understand what kept me sane, so I taught her. How to measure twice, cut once, how to sand with the grain, not against it. She listened close, hands steady, eyes bright. We built a small shelf together. When she finished, she smiled for the first time in weeks. She said, "I see why you love this. It makes things solid again." I nodded. That night, we ate soup and laughed once. It sounded strange in the empty house. Before bed, she said, "Mom's trying to call me. I'm not ready." I told her, "Take your time." After she went to sleep, I stood in the workshop doorway watching the moonlight on the tools. The world still turned. And somehow, I was still part of it. Days found their rhythm again. Morning coffee, steady hands, wood dust on the floor. Amy stayed a week, then left for work, promising to visit. The house didn't feel empty this time. It felt honest. Marissa called. The case was nearly closed. Partial recovery of funds. Clear title to the house. She said, "You did well, Mr. Carter." I thanked her, hung up, and looked around at everything still standing. The clock ticked. The chair in the corner waited for its next coat of oil. I picked up sandpaper and started again. Each stroke whispered calm. Outside, sunlight touched the porch rail, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe without guilt. The past wasn't gone. It was just wood, scarred but strong enough to hold weight. And maybe that was enough. After Amy left, the house fell silent again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not heavy, just still. I swept the floors, opened the curtains, let the light in. The dust looked like tiny snowflakes floating through sunbeams. I caught myself humming once, stopped, then kept humming anyway. The rhythm helped. I started fixing small things I'd ignored. A loose hinge, a cracked drawer, a squeaky step. Repair made sense when nothing else did. Each nail, each turn of a screw felt like proof that I could rebuild something, even if it was small. When evening came, I cooked a simple meal, sat at the table alone, no tension, no lies. The food tasted plain, but real. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. I realized I wasn't waiting for her anymore. The past had its place, but it didn't own the room. Not tonight. 2 nights later, someone knocked on the back door. For a heartbeat, I expected her. But it was Hank, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He said, "Couldn't sleep. Thought you might not either." We sat on the porch, watching the sky fade from gray to blue-black. He asked if I missed her. I said yes, but not the way he meant. I missed the life I thought we had. He nodded, said that's the part that lingers, the ghost of what should have been. We talked about work, about nothing important. The cold crept in, but it felt clean, not cruel. Before leaving, he said, "Don't stay in the dark too long, Jack." I promised I wouldn't. After he left, I stood there listening to the night. For the first time, the dark didn't scare me. It just felt honest, like it had been waiting for me to notice it was peaceful. Days started to build a rhythm again. Wake up, coffee, workshop, lunch, sand, carve, repeat. Simple steps, but they kept me moving. I took a new commission from a young couple, a rocking chair for their first child. The design was familiar, steady. Every cut of wood reminded me that strength lives in grain lines, not in gloss. I worked slow, patient. The smell of fresh cedar filled the air, cleaner than any perfume. Each evening, I'd walk the yard, checking fences, listening to crickets. Neighbors waved now, not out of pity, but habit. It felt good. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had learned its place. Quiet, manageable. When I locked up each night, I whispered, "Tomorrow will do." And it always did. One afternoon, Marissa phoned. Her tone carried satisfaction. "The court approved restitution," she said. 28,000 recovered. The rest was gone, but she sounded proud. "You kept your dignity, Jack. That matters." I thanked her. After we hung up, I sat in the workshop, staring at the papers she'd helped me save. Numbers didn't heal, but they felt like closure. I poured coffee, took one slow sip, and realized I could breathe without anger. The radio played low. Old country songs about survival. The words hit different now. They weren't sad anymore. They were steady. Outside, light spilled across the floorboards. I wiped my hands on a rag, turned off the lamp, and thought maybe, just maybe, life had stopped feeling like aftermath. It was beginning again, quietly, like sawdust settling after a long cut. A week later, a letter came from Sharon Reed, Colin's wife. She thanked me for telling the truth before he drained her savings, too. Said she'd filed charges, said he'd left town. She ended with, "You saved my life without meaning to." I folded the letter, placed it in the same drawer where Elaine's apology used to sit. One stayed, the other turned to ash. Balance, maybe. That night, I stepped outside with a mug of tea. The moon was high, full, clean. Somewhere out there, 2 marriages had fallen apart, and yet the world hadn't stopped turning. I breathed in the cold air and thought about second chances. Not with people, but with myself. Sometimes survival is the only miracle you get. And sometimes it's enough. A few days later, Hank mentioned the church potluck. He said, "Mary Wilson asked if you're coming. She makes those lemon bars you like." I laughed for the first time in months. He grinned. "Go. You could use company." I wasn't sure. Crowds meant questions, but Saturday came and I drove there anyway. The hall smelled of baked bread and coffee. People nodded, smiled, careful but kind. Mary waved me over. We talked about simple things, gardens, weather, her grandkids. Her laugh felt real, easy. When she offered another lemon bar, I said yes. On the drive home, the radio played softly. The road looked the same, yet somehow brighter. Healing doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, disguised as small talk and sugar. A week later, Hank asked me to drive him to the cemetery, his wife's anniversary. I waited in the truck while he stood at her grave. He didn't speak when he returned, just nodded thanks. I knew the silence. Grief has no schedule. It just changes its shape. On the drive back, he said, "She'd be glad I wasn't alone today." I told him I was glad too. We stopped at the diner for coffee. The waitress smiled without pity this time. That small kindness felt like a door opening. When I got home, I stood by the window, looking at the empty driveway. And for the first time, I didn't picture Elaine's car there. Just space. Open. Quiet. Possible. March came early. Snow melted into soft mud along the porch steps. Crocuses pushed through the soil, purple and brave. I opened every window, let the wind move through the rooms. The house smelled clean again. I oiled the rocking chair, polished the arms until they shone. It was ready for delivery. When the young couple arrived, the woman touched the chair like it was holy. She said, "It's perfect." I smiled, said, "Build it strong. It'll last." After they left, I stood in the doorway, watching sunlight spill where their truck had been. The world keeps making room for new stories. Mine wasn't over, just quieter now. Another envelope came, Elaine's handwriting again. I didn't open it. I left it on the shelf beside the tin of ashes. Some words aren't meant to be read twice. Instead, I wrote her name once on a scrap of wood and sanded it away until the surface turned smooth. Forgiveness, maybe. I didn't need to hear her reasons. I already knew them. Fear, loneliness, time, all the things that visit everyone eventually. The difference is what you build from them. I built quiet. I built peace. Outside, the wind moved through the bare branches. Each sound felt like a small goodbye. I woke before dawn. The sky was pale, silver at the edges. Coffee steamed in my cup, warm in my hands. The house didn't echo anymore. It breathed. I sat on the porch listening to birds start their morning songs. The same place where everything once fell apart now felt steady again. Hank waved from his yard. I raised my cup. Simple peace. No promises, no pretending, just life continuing in its quiet rhythm. When the sun rose, the light caught on the porch rail, gold against the wood I'd built with my own hands. It wasn't a symbol or a sign. It was just morning. Clean, honest, alive. And that was enough. Weeks passed without trouble. The mornings followed the same rhythm. Coffee, radio, workshop. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. One afternoon, I found an old photograph in a drawer. Me and Elaine in front of the garage, 20 years younger. We were laughing, grease on our hands, pride in our faces. I stared at it a long time, wondering how two people lose the map back to each other. Then I slid it into a box marked past years. I didn't throw it away. Some memories deserve to rest, not vanish. That evening, I grilled dinner on the porch, ate under the last of the daylight. Across the street, kids rode their bikes, shouting and alive. Life was still loud somewhere. I smiled at that. When the porch light flicked on, I whispered, "You did good, Jack. You're still here." And for the first time, I believed it. The next Saturday, a car stopped at the gate. A woman stepped out, Sharon Reed, Colin's wife. She looked different from her photo, stronger somehow. She thanked me for helping expose him, said he'd left town, probably for good. Then she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check, money from the settlement. "You earned this," she said. I shook my head. "Keep it. You've got more to rebuild than I do." She smiled, a quiet understanding passing between us. Before she left, she said, "You reminded me that silence can be power." After she drove away, I stood at the gate for a while, watching the dust settle. It felt strange. Two broken lives crossing paths and still finding grace. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about recognizing pain in someone else and not turning away. Spring deepened. The gossip faded. People found new stories to tell. At the diner, the waitress poured coffee and asked about my projects instead of my past. Normal talk. It felt good. I built shelves for the library, a bench for the park. The mayor stopped by to thank me. Small gestures, steady work. At night, I'd drive through town, watching lights glow in windows, families laughing over dinner. For a long time, that view used to hurt. Now it felt like proof that life keeps going, no matter how much you lose. I turned off the radio halfway home just to listen to the engine hum. The road sounded peaceful again. When I parked, I sat there a minute, hand on the wheel, thinking, I'm still part of this place, still part of something that works. And that was enough to make the quiet drive worth it. One afternoon, Amy called. She said she was coming up for the weekend. When she arrived, she brought groceries and that same tired smile she used to wear after long shifts. We cooked dinner together, moved easy around the kitchen like we used to. Over the meal, she said, Mom wrote me again. I looked up, waited. She wants to apologize. I don't know what to say. I told her, say what you need, not what she wants. Amy nodded slowly. After dinner, we walked the yard. The trees were green again, strong. She said, You seem different, Dad, calmer. I smiled. Guess I finally stopped fighting ghosts. Before bed, she hugged me tight. No words, just a steady heartbeat against my chest. That sound meant more than any apology ever could. The next morning, Amy asked to see the Two Pines cabin. I hesitated but agreed. We drove in quiet through winding roads. When we found it, the sign was half rotted, door hanging loose. Inside smelled of dust and old lies, furniture covered in sheets, a coffee mug still on the table. Amy ran her fingers across the counter. This is where she came? I nodded. She whispered, I thought it would look different. I said, so did I. We left without taking anything. At the edge of the driveway, I looked back once. It was just wood and stone, stripped of meaning. Driving home, I felt lighter. Closure doesn't need revenge. Sometimes it's just seeing the monster and realizing it's small. June arrived hot and relentless. The garage turned into a furnace by noon. I worked slower, taking breaks under the maple tree. Sweat soaked through my shirt, but it felt good. Earned. Amy called often now. Hank came by with iced tea. We talked about fishing, maybe taking a trip come fall. The air buzzed with insects, the smell of cut grass thick. Every small thing reminded me how alive ordinary life could be. I used to think peace was quiet. Now I knew it was rhythm, steady work, honest days, simple rest. At night, I left the windows open and listened to crickets. No ghosts, no weight, just air moving through the house I'd built. I whispered a thank you into the dark, not to anyone, just to the time that finally gave me back my breath. A letter came in July. Amy handed it to me, her mother's handwriting again. Do you want me to read it first? She asked. I said no. I opened it slow. Elaine wrote that she was living in another state, working part-time, trying to make peace. She said she still dreams of the house, of me in the workshop. She asked for forgiveness. I folded the pages, placed them in the box of past years. Amy watched. I said, forgiveness isn't words on paper. It's how you stop hating. She nodded. Later that evening, she caught me humming an old tune. She smiled. Maybe she heard what I meant without saying it. That I had forgiven her mother, not to free her, but to free myself. Late August, a storm rolled through. Thunder shook the roof. Rain hammered the porch. I sat by the window with coffee, lights flickering. For a moment, the world sounded like that night at the motel. Wind, water, fear. But this time, no betrayal waited in the dark. Only weather. I watched lightning split the sky, bright, then gone. Storms end faster than pain, but both pass. When it quieted, I stepped outside. The air smelled sharp, clean. Puddles shimmered under the street lamp. I whispered, still standing, and meant it. Some nights test your walls. Some prove they held. This one proved mine did. Autumn returned. Amy visited again with her newborn son. She handed him to me, small and warm. He slept in my arms, safe. Beside us stood the rocking chair I'd built months ago. I sat down, started to rock slow. Wood creaked softly, steady as a heartbeat. Amy watched, smiling. She said, he'll know his grandpa built this. I nodded, throat tight. That chair would hold stories long after I was gone. Not of betrayal or loss, but of endurance. Every curve, every joint spoke one truth. What breaks can still hold weight if built right again? When the baby stirred, I whispered, easy, little one. The world's strong enough. And for once, I believed it. The house sleeps easy now, no ghosts, no waiting, just life breathing in its own rhythm. I keep the workshop clean, tools lined in order. Sometimes I hear Amy's voice on the phone. Sometimes her son's laughter through the receiver. The sound fills the rooms the way love used to. Hank still visits. We sit outside counting fireflies. He says, "You ever think about dating again?" I laugh. No rush. I've got enough peace to share. The truth is, I'm content. What I built outlasted what I lost. Wood, time, forgiveness. They all share the same rule. You shape them slow, and they hold. As the sun sets behind the trees, I close the workshop door, the smell of cedar following me inside. Life didn't give me what I wanted. It gave me what I needed, a second chance to build something that finally stays. Evenings grew longer as summer faded. The air turned soft, cooler against my skin. I started walking after dinner down the same road I'd driven 100 times before. Now I walked it slow, watching the sky shift from gold to blue. Each house had its own light, its own noise. A dog barking, someone laughing through a window. Life moved, unbothered. I liked that. When I came home, I'd sit on the porch and listen to the wind pass through the trees. Sometimes I talked out loud, not to anyone, just to the air. I'd say things like, "You made it," or "She's doing fine now." Little reminders that the worst parts were behind me. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It drifts in like dusk, until one day you realize it's been sitting beside you all along. That night, I fell asleep in the rocking chair, the sound of crickets steady as breathing. One morning, Amy called early. Her voice was bright. She said her son had taken his first steps. I could hear his tiny laugh through the phone, wild and proud. Amy said, "He walked straight to the chair you built." I smiled until my eyes burned. She said, "He touched the armrest like he knew." After we hung up, I sat in the workshop staring at my hands. They were rough, scarred, tired, but still capable of building something that carried love forward. The thought stayed with me all day. I sanded a new piece of oak, just to feel the grain. Maybe every scar, every loss had led here, to the quiet proof that something I made could stand without me. When the evening came, I whispered, "That's enough of a miracle for one life." By October, the trees had turned. Gold, red, brown, the colors of endings that don't hurt. I spent mornings sweeping leaves from the porch, watching them gather again by nightfall. There was something honest in that repetition. You clean, it returns. You love, it fades. Still, you do it anyway. Hank joined me some afternoons. We didn't talk much. Sometimes he'd bring pie and we'd just sit. He said, "Funny how life shrinks down, huh?" I nodded, but I didn't mind the shrinking. What was left was simple, true. That night, I watched the moon rise through the bare branches. For once, I didn't feel the need to remember or regret, just gratitude that I was still here to see it. A week later, Amy mailed me a letter. She wrote it on paper, not text. Said she missed the quiet mornings here, missed how I made coffee too strong and never complained. She wrote about her job, her son, her husband, how life felt busy but good. At the end, she said, "You were right, Dad, peace isn't loud." I read that line again and again. Then I folded the letter and placed it on the workbench, the same spot where her mother's words had burned away years ago. This one stayed because it came from a place that had learned. I looked at the window. Light fell soft across the wood. Some lessons take a lifetime to teach. Some only need a single line. Amy's words were enough. Winter crept in quiet this time. No storm, no chaos. Just frost on the windows, the smell of wood smoke. I fixed small things around the house. A loose board, a leaky faucet. The rhythm steadied me. Hank brought soup one evening, said, "Feels like the world slowed down just for us." I smiled. Maybe it finally caught up. We talked about nothing. Weather, football, old songs. When he left, I sat by the window, watching snow drift through the porch light. It looked the same as that night years ago, but this time, there was no fear in it. Just beauty. I realized something then. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. I was simply living. And that was more than enough. March again. The crocuses bloomed early, stubborn as ever. I planted a few new ones near the fence, just to see what might grow. Amy visited with her family. The boy ran through the yard, laughing like sunlight itself. He pointed at the flowers and said, "Pretty!" I lifted him, told him, "They always come back, no matter the cold." Amy smiled. We ate lunch outside, the air sweet with thaw. She said, "You should come visit us this summer." "Maybe," I said. "I like the quiet here." She understood. Before leaving, she hugged me and whispered, "I love you, Dad." I held her a little longer than usual. Some moments ask for silence. That was one of them. I started a final project, a dining table. Big, strong, simple. I didn't build it for anyone, just for the act of making. Each cut was measured slow. Each joint fit clean. The sound of the saw echoed soft through the shop. When it was done, I ran my hand along the grain, feeling the smoothness I'd earned. It stood steady, like time itself. Hank stopped by, looked it over, nodded once. "Looks like something that'll outlast us," he said. "Maybe that's the point," I answered. We drank coffee beside it. No rush, no talk of the past. Just two men sitting beside proof that some things, if built with care, never fall apart. That night, I stayed in the workshop long after dark. The air smelled of sawdust and spring rain. I sat at the table, fingers tracing the wood's lines. Every scar, every knot told its story. Mine was written in them too, not in loss or anger, but in what survived. The chair, the porch, the house, the quiet, all still here. I thought about Elaine once more, not with hate, not with longing, just with understanding. We had our time. Then life asked us to build different things. I stood, turned off the light, and the room held its peace. Outside, the night was cool and calm. I whispered, "Still standing," and the wind answered softly through the trees. Morning came quiet and clean. The world outside was soft, almost new. I sat at the table I'd built, coffee warm in my hands. The light touched the grain of the wood, same as it once did my skin, and I realized everything I had lost had simply changed its form. Love hadn't disappeared. It had become stillness, patience, the steady rhythm of work and time. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live without the need for answers. All that pain, all that silence, it had built something inside me stronger than pride. Maybe that's what survival really is. Not strength, not victory, just the quiet decision to keep showing up, to build, to stay. I looked around the house, every nail, every board, every scar of my making, and felt a kind of peace I hadn't known before. The years had taken much, but they'd left me myself, and that, after everything, was enough.